The Korean billionaire CEO was ordering a wedding cake. Until he saw his ex-wife with a child. He walked into the bakery to order a wedding cake for another woman. He never expected to see the wife he'd abandoned 5 years ago. He definitely never expected the little girl with his eyes. The bell above the door chimed softly as Kang-min pushed it open, and the scent of cinnamon and fresh-baked bread wrapped around him like a memory he couldn't place. He paused, one polished Oxford still on the threshold, the other on worn wooden floors. His security team waited by the black sedan, exchanging confused glances. In 38 years of living, and 12 years of running Korea's fastest-growing conglomerate, Kang-min had never personally ordered anything. His suits, his homes, his meals, even the woman he was about to marry, all of it filtered through assistants, advisors, his father's carefully vetted circle of power. But today, something had pulled him here. Something he couldn't name. The bakery was small. Too small for a man who controlled boardrooms across Seoul, Hong Kong, and Singapore. The walls were warm cream, lined with photos of smiling customers and handwritten thank you notes in a dozen languages. Sunlight streamed through wide windows, illuminating shelves of golden pastries and glass jars labeled in careful handwriting. A radio played somewhere in the back, something classical, strings and piano. This was not his world. Kang-min adjusted his cufflinks and rehearsed the order in his head. A 3-tier wedding cake. Elegant. Minimal. Something appropriate for a merger disguised as a marriage. Then he saw her. She stood behind the counter, her back to him, tying an apron around her waist. Her hair was wrapped in a simple headscarf, plainer than he remembered. Her movements were efficient, practiced, the kind of grace that came from doing something 1,000 times. She reached for something on the top shelf, and the afternoon light caught the curve of her shoulder, the line of her neck. Kang-min's breath stopped. Halima. She hadn't noticed him yet. She was humming, low and soft, completely absorbed in arranging pastries in the display case. Her sleeves were dusted with flour. There was a smudge of something dark on her wrist, maybe chocolate. Kang-min's hand tightened on the edge of the counter. 5 years. It had been 5 years since she'd walked out of his life with nothing but signed divorce papers and a single line written in her careful handwriting, "This is the only way." He'd assumed betrayal. Weakness. A lack of loyalty to the future he was building. He should leave. He should turn around, walk back to the car, and have his secretary order the wedding cake online like any rational CEO in his position would. But his feet wouldn't move. Then Halima looked up. Their eyes met across the small space, and Kang-min watched the color drain from her face. The small notepad in her hand slipped, hitting the counter with a soft thud. For 3 seconds, neither of them moved. Neither of them breathed. Kang-min. She whispered. Before he could respond, before he could form words around the shock lodged in his throat, a child's laughter rang out from the back room. Small feet pounded against wooden floors, and a little girl burst through the curtained doorway, her dark hair bouncing in 2 messy pigtails. "Mommy, Mommy. I finished the cookie shapes." The child clutched a tray of unevenly cut dough, her face bright with pride. She couldn't have been more than 5 years old. She wore a yellow apron 3 sizes too big, rolled up at the sleeves, and her skin was warm brown, darker than Kang-min's but carrying the same undertones as Halima's. But it was her eyes that made Kang-min's world tilt violently on its axis. Almond-shaped. Dark. Unmistakably Korean. Unmistakably his. The little girl stopped when she noticed the stranger standing in her mother's bakery. She pressed closer to Halima's leg, suddenly shy, peeking out at Kang-min with curious eyes that reflected his own face back at him. "Hannah, sweetheart," Halima's voice was steady, but Kang-min heard the tremor underneath. He'd always been able to hear it, even when she tried to hide her fear, her hurt, her anger. "Go to the back for just a moment, okay? But I wanted to show you. I'll come see it in just a minute. I promise." Halima's hand shook as she smoothed her daughter's hair. Go on now. Hannah obeyed, but not before glancing back at Kang-min one more time. Something in her expression, a tilt of her head, a quiet curiosity in her gaze, it was him. It was undeniably him. The curtain swung closed. The classical music continued playing. Outside, a delivery truck rumbled past. And Kang-min stood frozen in the small bakery, staring at the woman he'd loved and lost, knowing that everything he thought he understood about the past 5 years had just shattered. How long were you going to keep this from me? His voice came out barely above a whisper. Halima's jaw tightened. She picked up the notepad she'd dropped, her movements careful, controlled. You need to leave. That child. You need to leave, Kang-min. Her voice was stronger now, but he saw her hands shaking. You have no right to come in here. No right? The words exploded from him, louder than he'd intended. Years of discipline, of maintaining perfect control in every negotiation, every crisis, it all evaporated. I have a daughter and you never told me. Lower your voice. Halima's eyes flashed, and there was the fire he remembered. The strength that had first drawn him to her at that international summit 6 years ago, when she challenged his acquisition strategy in front of 200 investors and made him rethink his entire approach to ethical business. This is my place of business, and you will not cause a scene. A scene? Kang-min laughed, a harsh sound that hurt his own throat. You disappeared. You left me with papers and silence, and now I find out I have a... He stopped, unable to finish the sentence. The enormity of it was crushing him. Halima set down the notepad very carefully. When she looked at him again, her eyes were dry but hard. You want to talk about scenes? Halima's voice dropped to something low and dangerous. She moved around the counter, putting herself between Kang-min and the back room where Hannah had disappeared. You stood in a boardroom with your father and 12 lawyers and asked me, to leave quietly. To make it easier for everyone. Kang-min's chest tightened. There was an investigation. The board said. The board said I leaked financial data. Her laugh was bitter, sharp enough to cut. Your father's board. Your father's investigators. Your father's convenient scapegoat. Halima. You didn't even ask if it was true. She stepped closer, and he could see the flowers still dusting her sleeves, the exhaustion carved into the lines around her eyes. You just accepted it. Because it was easier than fighting for me. The words hit like physical blows. Kang-min remembered that day. The polished conference room on the 43rd floor. His father at the head of the table, calm and controlled. The folders spread across mahogany. Internal communications. Timestamps. Evidence. He remembered Halima's face, pale, shocked, pleading. He remembered his own silence. I was protecting the company, he said, but the words sounded hollow even to his own ears. I was your wife. Halima's voice cracked despite her effort to stay composed. And you chose a merger over the truth. I didn't know. You didn't ask. She wrapped her arms around herself, a defensive gesture he recognized from their marriage. You didn't question. You didn't fight. You just let them erase me. Kang-min's hands curled into fists at his sides. If you were innocent, why didn't you defend yourself? Why just disappear? Because I was pregnant. The air left the room. Halima's jaw trembled, but she kept her spine straight. I found out 2 days before your father's lawyers showed up at our apartment with the divorce papers. 2 days, Kang-min. I was still trying to figure out how to tell you when they were offering me money to disappear quietly. I never authorized. You didn't have to. Her eyes flashed. You authorized it the moment you sat in that boardroom and said nothing. The moment you looked at me like I was a liability instead of the woman who'd stood beside you for 3 years. The classical music had stopped. The bakery felt too small, too quiet, like the walls were closing in. "I didn't know you were pregnant," Kang-min said hoarsely. "I would have." "What?" Halima demanded. "Chosen differently. Stood up to your father. You can't even say it with conviction." He couldn't. "Because she was right. I learned I was carrying your child alone," Halima continued, her voice steadier now, like she'd rehearsed this conversation 1,000 times in her head. "In a clinic in Itaewon, with a doctor who didn't speak English and no one to hold my hand. I was terrified. And you were on the news announcing your company's expansion into Southeast Asia." Kang-min felt something crack inside his chest. "I tried to tell you," she whispered. "I called your office 17 times. Your secretary said you'd asked not to be disturbed by personal matters." He remembered. God, he remembered giving that instruction. "Halima. She is half yours," Halima said firmly, cutting him off. She straightened her shoulders, and there was steel in her voice now. "And fully mine. I carried her alone. Gave birth to her alone. Taught her to walk, to talk, to be kind in a world that wasn't kind to us. You don't get to walk in here with your tailored suit and your guilt and claim her." "I'm not trying to." "Then what are you trying to do?" Halima challenged. "Because 5 years ago, you had a choice. And you chose silence. You chose your father's version of the truth. You chose the empire over everything else." The words settled between them like broken glass. Kang-min looked toward the curtained doorway where his daughter, had vanished. He thought about the investigation. The emails his father's team had shown him. The timestamps that had seemed so damning. He'd never asked to see the originals. He'd never questioned the narrative. He'd never fought. "I was wrong," he said quietly. Halima's expression didn't soften. "Yes. You were. Let me make it right." "You can't." She moved back behind the counter, putting distance between them again. "Some things, Kang-min, you don't get to fix just because you finally decided to show up." She picked up a dishcloth and began wiping down the counter with careful, deliberate movements, a clear dismissal. Kang-min stood there, his expensive shoes on worn wooden floors, his world built on assumptions that were crumbling beneath him. He'd thought he knew what happened 5 years ago. He'd thought he'd made the right choice. But standing in this small bakery, watching the woman he'd failed wipe away flour and sugar like she was erasing any trace of him, Kang-min realized his memory wasn't just incomplete. It was a lie he told himself to sleep at night. And the truth was going to cost him everything. The penthouse was silent. Kang-min stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul, the city light sprawling beneath him like a circuit board, cold, efficient, beautiful in its precision. 43 floors below, traffic moved in organized streams. From here, the world looked orderly. Controllable. From here, he couldn't hear the laughter of a 5-year-old girl in a yellow apron. He pressed his palm against the glass. It was cool, unyielding. 5 years. His daughter had lived 5 years without him. 60 months. 260 weeks. 1,825 days of first words and scraped knees and bedtime stories he would never get back. Had she lost her first tooth yet? Did she have nightmares? What made her laugh? The questions wouldn't stop coming, each one another weight on his chest. Kang-min had negotiated billion-dollar deals, managed international crises, rebuilt entire departments from the ground up. But he couldn't answer the simplest question about his own child. What's her favorite color? His phone buzzed on the marble counter. He'd ignored it for 3 hours, 17 missed calls, 42 unread messages. His fiancée. Her father. Board members. His secretary asking if she should reschedule tomorrow's merger meeting. He let it buzz. Then his father's name appeared on the screen. Kang-min's jaw tightened, but he answered. You saw her, didn't you? His father's voice was cool, controlled. No greeting. No pretense. The woman. Yes. And? Kang-min closed his eyes. There's a child. Silence stretched across the line, not shock, he realized. Assessment. I see, his father said finally. Is there proof? She has my face. The words came out rough, raw. My eyes. My. That's unfortunate. His father's tone didn't change, as if they were discussing a minor stock fluctuation. But irrelevant. Something cold settled in Kang-min's stomach. Irrelevant. You're about to finalize the largest international merger of your career. The Min family has invested considerable political capital in this union. Do not, his father paused for emphasis, ruin it for a scandal. Scandal. Kang-min opened his eyes, staring at his reflection in the dark glass. Is that what you call my daughter? I call it poor timing and poorer judgment. His father's voice hardened. That woman disappeared for a reason. She made her choice. You need to make yours. She didn't make a choice. She was forced out. She was a liability. She was my wife. The words exploded from him. And you framed her. The line went dead. Kang-min stood there, phone still pressed to his ear, listening to silence. Around him, the penthouse stretched out in carefully curated perfection. Minimalist furniture. Award plaques on walls. Art chosen by consultants who understood market value but nothing about beauty. No toys. No drawings stuck to the refrigerator with magnets. No small shoes by the door. No life. He thought about Halima's bakery, the handwritten thank you notes, the crooked chalkboard menu, the warmth that had nothing to do with ovens. He thought about Hannah pressing close to her mother's leg, those curious eyes studying him with an intelligence that felt achingly familiar. Mommy says people who look alike sometimes belong together. Kang-min set down his phone and walked to his study. 3 walls of law books, business journals, economic forecasts. He pulled out a leather folder, the divorce papers from 5 years ago. He'd never read them thoroughly. Just signed where his lawyers indicated. Now he read every word. This is the only way. Halima's handwriting in the margin, small and careful. Not angry. Not vengeful. Resigned. He thought about the investigation. The emails his father's team had presented. The timestamps, the IP addresses, the internal communications that had seemed so damning. He'd never questioned them. He'd never fought. He'd chosen the easy path because fighting would have meant choosing Halima over his father. Over the company. Over the future that had been mapped out for him since birth. And what had that choice built? Glass towers. Profit margins. Power. And a daughter who didn't know his name. Kang-min returned to the window. The city lights blurred slightly, he realized his eyes were wet. He'd spent 38 years building an empire. He'd acquired companies, dominated markets, earned respect from people who never gave it easily. But he'd never held his daughter's hand. He'd never heard her call him father. He'd never been there when she was afraid, or proud, or learning to be brave. And suddenly, all of it, the boardrooms, the mergers, the legacy his father had spent decades constructing, felt like ashes in his mouth. His phone buzzed again. His fiancée, where are you? The Min-youngs are asking questions. Kang-min turned away from the window. Tomorrow, he would return to the bakery. Not as Korea's third-largest tech CEO. Not as the man about to consolidate power across 3 continents. Just as a man who'd made the worst mistake of his life. And who had no idea if he could ever make it right. But he had to try. Because power, he was finally learning, meant nothing if you had no one to share it with. The bell chimed at 7:43 a.m. Halima looked up from the dough she was kneading, flour dusting her forearms. Her hand stilled when she saw him standing in the doorway. No security detail. No expensive overcoat. Just Kang-min in a simple black sweater and jeans that probably cost more than her monthly rent but didn't announce it. He looked like he hadn't slept. "We're not open yet," she said quietly. "I know." He stayed near the door, like he was afraid moving closer would shatter something fragile. I needed to come back." Halima studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded toward the small table near the window. Hannah's coloring. And there she was. Kang-min's breath caught the same way it had yesterday. His daughter sat cross-legged on a chair too big for her, bent over a coloring book with the fierce concentration only children possessed. Her tongue poked out slightly as she carefully filled in what looked like a dinosaur. Purple crayon. The whole thing was purple. She hadn't noticed him yet. "Hannah," Halima said gently, "we have a visitor." The little girl looked up. Recognition flickered across her face, not quite understanding, but awareness. She tilted her head, studying him with those unsettling familiar eyes. "Hi," Kang-min managed. His voice came out rougher than intended. "Hello." Hannah's response was careful, polite. Halima had taught her manners. Halima wiped her hands on her apron, leaving small flower prints. "Hannah, this is..." She hesitated, and Kang-min saw the war playing out behind her eyes. What label could she possibly use? "This is someone I used to know. Someone from before you were born." It wasn't fair, reducing 3 years of marriage to "someone I used to know," but Kang-min understood. He had no right to more. "What's your name?" Hannah asked. "Kang-min." She tested it silently, her lips forming the syllables. Then she went back to her coloring, apparently satisfied. Kang-min glanced at Halima. She gave him the smallest nod, permission, though not acceptance, and turned back to her dough. He approached the table slowly, like Hannah was a small animal that might startle. "May I sit?" Hannah looked up again, considering. "Okay." He lowered himself into the chair across from her. From this angle, he could see her coloring more clearly. Not just a dinosaur, a whole family of them. Big one, medium one, small one. "That's beautiful," he said. "It's a triceratops family." Hannah selected a green crayon for the grass. "The baby one is learning to be brave." Kang-min's throat tightened. "That's important. Being brave. Mommy says everyone gets scared sometimes. Even grown-ups." Hannah glanced at him, then back at her drawing. "Are you scared?" The question was so direct, so innocent, that Kang-min forgot how to breathe for a moment. "Yes," he admitted. "Right now, I'm very scared." "Why?" "How did you explain existential regret to a 5-year-old?" "Because I'm meeting someone important," he said carefully. "And I want her to like me." Hannah's crayon paused. She looked up at him fully now, and Kang-min saw her really seeing him for the first time. Her eyes traced his face, his nose, his jawline, the shape of his eyes. "You look like me," she said softly. Kang-min's chest cracked open. "I do." "Like." Hannah frowned, trying to work through something too big for her small vocabulary. "Like we match." "We do match." Behind the counter, Halima had stopped kneading. She stood very still, her back to them, but Kang-min could see the tension in her shoulders. Hannah set down her crayon and leaned forward, as if sharing a secret. "Mommy says people who look alike sometimes belong together. Like me and Mommy. We have the same smile." Kang-min's vision blurred slightly. He blinked hard. "That's true," he whispered. "You and your mommy do belong together." "Do we?" Hannah asked, pointing between herself and Kang-min. "Belong together?" The question hung in the warm air of the bakery. The morning light streaming through the windows caught the flour dust floating like snow. Somewhere in the back, the oven timer beeped softly. Kang-min looked at this child, his child, with her purple dinosaurs and her serious questions and her eyes that reflected his own face back at him. He thought about 5 years of missed moments. 5 years of choices that couldn't be undone. But maybe there were choices that could still be made. He glanced at Halima. She had turned slightly, watching them with an expression he couldn't read. Guarded. Afraid. But not stopping him. Kang-min looked back at Hannah and lowered himself further, sliding from the chair to kneel beside the table so they were eye level. A CEO didn't kneel. A billionaire didn't make himself small. But a father could. I'd like to belong, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. If you'll have me. Hannah studied him with that unnerving seriousness children sometimes possessed, like she could see straight through to the parts of him he kept hidden from boardrooms and shareholders and even himself. Then, slowly, she smiled. And Kang-min understood that everything he'd built in 38 years meant nothing compared to this single moment of fragile, terrifying hope. The headline appeared on financial news sites at 6:47 a.m. Kang-min postpones high-profile wedding, merger in question. By noon, his phone had become a weapon of mass distraction. 53 calls. 87 messages. His fiancée's father. Board members. Investors from Singapore, Hong Kong, New York. All asking the same question, what are you doing? Kang-min sat in his office on the 43rd floor, watching the messages accumulate like debts he couldn't pay. Through the glass walls, he could see his executive team pretending not to stare. Whispers followed him through hallways now. Concern masked as professionalism. He's having a breakdown. Midlife crisis. There's another woman. They weren't entirely wrong about the last part. His secretary knocked softly. Sir, the Min Young family's legal team is requesting a meeting. They're threatening to withdraw from the merger entirely. Let them. Her eyes widened. Sir. I said let them. Kang-min didn't look up from the document he was studying, 5-year-old emails from the investigation into Halima. Cancel my afternoon meetings. All of them. But the Singapore investors. Cancel them. She hesitated, then nodded and retreated. Kang-min returned to the emails. He'd been reading them for 3 days straight, cross-referencing timestamps, tracking IP addresses, comparing the evidence his father's investigators had presented against the original server logs his IT director had quietly pulled for him. The pattern was damning. Every leaked document had been accessed from a terminal in his father's executive suite. Every suspicious communication traced back to an account created 2 weeks before the investigation began. The timestamps had been altered. The metadata scrubbed. Professional. Thorough. Devastating. His father had framed Halima with the same precision he'd used to build an empire. The phone on his desk rang, the private line only 3 people had access to. Kang-min didn't need to check the caller ID. You're destroying everything I built. His father's voice was ice. No greeting. No pretense. You framed an innocent woman. I removed a liability. She was my wife. She was a distraction. His father's tone didn't waver. You were 27 years old, running a multi-billion-won corporation, and you married a foreign woman you'd known for 6 months. What did you expect me to do? Trust my judgment. Your judgment was compromised. A pause. It still is. Kang-min's grip tightened on the phone. You fabricated evidence. You paid investigators to lie. You destroyed her reputation. I protected the company. I protected you. His father's voice rose slightly, the first crack in his composure. And now you're throwing it all away for what? A child you've met once. A woman who wants nothing to do with you. She's my daughter. She's a complication. The word hung between them like a verdict. The board meets Friday, his father continued, controlled again. They're calling for a vote of confidence. If you continue down this path, canceling weddings, postponing mergers, chasing ghosts, they will remove you. I won't be able to stop them. You mean you won't try? Silence. I built this company from nothing, his father said quietly. I sacrificed everything, my health, my marriage, years of my life, so you could inherit something worth having. And you're going to throw it away because you suddenly developed a conscience. Kang-min thought about Hannah's purple dinosaurs. Her serious questions. The way she'd looked at him and asked if they belonged together. Maybe conscience is worth more than empire, he said. His father laughed, short, bitter. Spoken like someone who's never had to choose. I'm choosing now. Then you're a fool. The line went dead. Kang-min set down the phone and returned to the documents spread across his desk. Bank transfers. Email logs. Testimonies from investigators who'd since retired suspiciously wealthy. His father had been thorough. But not perfect. There were cracks. His office door opened without warning. 3 board members entered, Park, Chen, and Director Yoon. Their expressions were grave. We need to talk, Director Yoon said. Kang-min gestured to the chairs. They remained standing. The Min-young family has withdrawn, Park said. The merger is dead. Stock prices dropped 14% this morning. Shareholders are calling for emergency meetings. I'm aware. Then you're also aware, Chen added carefully, that we can't sustain this uncertainty. The company needs stability. Leadership that's focused. I am focused. On what? Director Yoon's voice was sharp. Because from where we're standing, you've abandoned a strategic marriage, tanked our biggest acquisition, and disappeared for hours at a time to visit a bakery in Itaewon. So they've been following him. My personal life. There is no personal life at this level, Yoon interrupted. You know that. Your father knows that. Every decision you make affects 15,000 employees, 60,000 shareholders, and the entire South Korean tech sector. Kang-min stood slowly. And what would you have me do? Marry someone I don't love for a merger? Ignore my daughter's existence for quarterly earnings? If necessary, Park said quietly. Yes. The words settled like stones. The board meets Friday at 9 a.m., Chen said. We're calling a vote. Either you recommit to this company, fully, completely, or we move forward with new leadership. You're asking me to choose. We're asking you to lead, Yoon corrected. Leaders make hard choices. Your father understands that. We hope you will too. They left without waiting for a response. Kang-min returned to the window. Seoul stretched out below him, the empire his father had built, the legacy he was supposed to protect. On his desk, his phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. He opened it. A photo. Hannah at the bakery table, holding up a drawing. Stick figures, 3 of them. 1 tall, 1 medium, 1 small. All holding hands. Below it, Halima's message. She asked me to send this to the man who looks like me. I don't know what you're planning. But she drew this after you left. Kang-min stared at the drawing. 3 days until the board vote. 3 days to choose between the empire he'd inherited and the daughter he'd abandoned. 3 days to decide what kind of man he actually was. The city lights flickered on as evening fell, and Kang-min finally understood what his father had never taught him. Some choices don't have good options. They only have true ones. Kang-min's father lived in a penthouse that overlooked Namsan Tower, a monument to achievement built on steel and stone and unwavering certainty. Kang-min arrived at 11 p.m. without announcement. The doorman recognized him, hesitated, then stepped aside. His father was in his study, as always. Mahogany desk. First edition business philosophy books. Framed photographs of handshakes with presidents, prime ministers, industry titans. Not a single family photo. I wondered when you'd come, his father said without looking up from the contract he was reviewing. Kang-min closed the door behind him. Why did you do it? You'll have to be more specific. Halima. The name felt heavy in his mouth. The investigation. The fabricated evidence. All of it. His father set down his pen with deliberate precision. I did what was necessary. Necessary. Kang-min moved closer to the desk. You destroyed an innocent woman's life because it was necessary. I protected my son from making a catastrophic mistake. His father finally looked up, and his eyes were calm, disturbingly so. You were 27. Brilliant in boardrooms but naive about people. That woman had a name. Was using you. A foreign woman with no connections, no family wealth, no strategic value. She saw a young CEO and an opportunity. She loved me. His father's expression didn't change. Love is a luxury people like us cannot afford. The words should have shocked Kang-min. Instead, they felt familiar. How many times had he heard variations of this? Emotion is weakness. Sentiment clouds judgment. Legacy transcends personal desire. She was pregnant, Kang-min said quietly. Did you know? A pause, barely perceptible, but there. I suspected. And you still forced her out. Especially then. His father stood, moving to the window that showcased his empire of lights. A child complicates everything. Custody battles. Public scrutiny. A mixed-race heir who would face questions, resistance. She's my daughter. She's a vulnerability. His father turned, and for the first time, Kang-min saw something like frustration in his expression. You think I don't understand what you're feeling? I had to make similar choices when you were young. Your mother wanted me home for birthdays, school events, family dinners. She wanted a husband who was present. Kang-min had heard this story before. His mother had left when he was 12, quietly, without dramatics, just packed her things and moved to Busan. He saw her twice a year now. Polite conversations. Careful distance. And you let her go, Kang-min said. I let her choose. His father's voice hardened. I built something that would outlast us both. Something that would provide for generations. That requires sacrifice. You sacrificed your family. I sacrificed sentiment for security. His father stepped closer. And I raised you to do the same. You were 10 years old when you attended your first board meeting. 15 when you presented your first quarterly analysis. You didn't go to school dances or play sports, you learned economics, strategy, how to read people and markets and power. You trained me to be you. I trained you to survive. His father's composure cracked slightly. Do you think this world rewards softness? Compassion? The moment you show weakness, someone will exploit it. I taught you that. Kang-min thought about the bakery. The warm smell of cinnamon. Hannah's purple dinosaurs and her question, do we belong together? He thought about Halima's tired eyes. 5 years of raising a child alone because he'd chosen silence over truth. What if you were wrong? Kang-min asked. His father's expression hardened. Excuse me? What if everything you taught me, sacrifice, strategy, legacy over love, what if all of it was just fear disguised as wisdom? You're being emotional. I'm being honest. Kang-min's voice rose. You built an empire, yes. But you're 73 years old, sitting alone in a penthouse, reviewing contracts at 11 p.m. Your wife left. Your son is standing here questioning everything you taught him. Your granddaughter doesn't know you exist. What exactly did you build? The silence that followed was devastating. Legacy, his father said finally, but his voice wavered. Something that will outlast. Outlast what? You're so obsessed with what comes after that you forgot to live in what is. Kang-min moved to the desk, placing both palms flat on the mahogany surface. Halima asked me to leave quietly. To make it easier. And I did. Because you taught me that difficult situations should be eliminated, not confronted. That's practical. It's cowardice. The word came out sharp, final. I was a coward. And you taught me how. His father's jaw tightened. If you walk away from this company, from your responsibilities, you'll lose everything. The board will vote you out. The Min Young family will sue for breach of contract. Investors will flee. Everything I built, everything we built, will be compromised. Maybe it should be. His father stepped back as if struck. Kang-min straightened. I have a daughter who drew me a picture. 3 stick figures holding hands. She doesn't know I'm a CEO. She doesn't care about mergers or stock prices or legacy. She just wants to know if I belong. And what will you tell her when you have nothing left? When the company fails, the money runs out, and all you have is sentiment? I'll tell her I chose her. Kang-min moved toward the door. I'll tell her that some things matter more than empires. You're making a mistake. Kang-min paused, hand on the doorknob. Maybe. But it's my mistake. Not yours. He left his father standing in that perfect study, surrounded by photographs of power and achievements and a legacy built on everything except the things that made life worth living. Outside, Seoul stretched out beneath him, still brilliant, still beautiful. But for the first time in 38 years, Kang-min understood. He didn't want to rule it. He just wanted to be present for the people who mattered. Even if it cost him everything else. The boardroom on the 43rd floor had never felt colder. 15 executives sat around the mahogany table, their expressions ranging from concern to barely concealed hostility. His father occupied the seat at the far end, not the head, but close enough to maintain influence. Director Yoon sat at the actual head, fingers steepled, waiting. Kang-min entered at exactly 9 a.m., carrying a single manila folder. Gentlemen, Yoon began, we're here to address the crisis of leadership that has destabilized this company over the past 2 weeks. Kang-min, you have the floor to explain your actions. We suggest you use it wisely. Kang-min placed the folder on the table but didn't open it yet. Before I begin, I need to ask, how many of you were involved in the investigation of Halima Osman 5 years ago? Uncomfortable glances. Park raised his hand. Chen. 3 others. And how many of you reviewed the actual evidence? Silence. I thought so. Kang-min opened the folder, distributing copies of documents around the table. These are the original server logs from the alleged data breach. Notice the timestamps. Notice the IP addresses. Every single leaked document was accessed from Terminal 4A. He paused, letting them read. That terminal is located in my father's executive suite. The room erupted. His father remained perfectly still, his expression unreadable. That's circumstantial, Director Yoon started. Page 3, Kang-min interrupted. Email correspondence between the lead investigator and an offshore account registered to a shell corporation. Payments totaling 800 million won. Page 5, testimony from 3 investigators who've since recanted their statements, claiming they were paid to falsify evidence. Park's face had gone pale. Chen pushed the documents away as if they were contaminated. You fabricated an investigation, Kang-min said, looking directly at his father. You destroyed an innocent woman's reputation. You forced her out of my life. And you did it to maintain control. His father finally spoke, his voice steady. I did what was necessary to protect this company. You protected nothing. Kang-min's voice was quiet but cut through the room like glass. You committed fraud. You paid for false testimony. And you've been covering it up for 5 years. This is outrageous, Yoon began. There's more. Kang-min didn't look away from his father. The woman you framed was pregnant when you forced her out. With my daughter. Your granddaughter. She's 5 years old. Her name is Hannah. The silence was absolute. I've spent the last 2 weeks with her, Kang-min continued. Learning what her favorite color is. Watching her color purple dinosaurs. Trying to earn the right to be called her father. He turned to address the entire board. And I've realized something. This company, everything we've built, it's been constructed on a foundation of lies and manipulation. My father taught me to sacrifice everything for legacy. To eliminate complications rather than confront them. Kang-min, his father's voice held a warning. I'm done. Kang-min cut him off. Done pretending this is acceptable. Done choosing power over truth. The Min-young merger is dead because it was built on a marriage I couldn't go through with. Our stock will drop because I'm about to tell the truth publicly. And this board needs to decide, do you want a company built on integrity, or one built on whatever my father thinks is necessary? Director Yoon's expression was unreadable. You understand what you're saying? The financial implications. I understand I have a 5-year-old daughter who asked me if we belong together. And I'm not going to lie to her the way this company has been lying for years. His father stood abruptly. You're destroying everything. You already did that. Kang-min's voice was firm. I'm just refusing to help you cover it up anymore. The room erupted in overlapping voices. Accusations. Demands for investigations. Chen was already on his phone. Park looked physically ill. Yoon raised a hand for silence. This board will need to review these documents. Conduct our own investigation. But if what you're saying is true, he looked at Kang-min's father. We'll have no choice but to call for your resignation. You can't. We can. Yoon's voice was steel. And we will. Kang-min's father looked around the table, seeing the same calculation in every face. The empire he'd built was turning on him. He gathered his papers with shaking hands and walked to the door. Before leaving, he looked back at his son. You'll regret this. Maybe, Kang-min said. But I'll be able to look my daughter in the eye when I tell her what I did. The door closed. The board sat in stunned silence. What happens now? Chen finally asked. Now, Kang-min said, we tell the truth. We issue a public statement. We acknowledge the fraud. We take responsibility for the damage done. And we rebuild, properly this time. The stock will crash. Yes. Investors will flee. Probably. We could lose everything. Kang-min thought about Hannah's drawing. 3 stick figures holding hands. Not everything, he said quietly. Just the things that were built on lies. Yoon studied him for a long moment. You understand you're committing corporate suicide. I'm committing to the truth. Those aren't the same thing. They should be. By 3 p.m., the statement had been released. By 4 p.m., the stock had dropped 23%. By 5 p.m., 3 major investors had pulled out entirely. Kang-min stood at his office window, watching the sun set over Seoul. His phone buzzed constantly, angry messages, threats, a few unexpected words of support. His empire was crumbling. And somehow, for the first time in 38 years, he could breathe. His secretary knocked softly. Sir. There's a woman here. With a child. She says you're expecting them. Kang-min turned. Through the glass wall, he saw Halima standing in the reception area, Hannah's small hand in hers. The little girl was looking around with wide eyes, taking in the tall ceilings and modern art. Yes, Kang-min said, his voice rough. I'm expecting them. He walked out to meet his daughter. The empire could fall. But he was finally choosing what mattered. The bakery was closed, but the lights were still on. Kang-min knocked softly on the glass door. Through the window, he could see Hannah at the small table, bent over something with intense concentration. Halima emerged from the back, flour still dusting her sleeves, and paused when she saw him. For a moment, he thought she might not open the door. Then she did. "I saw the news," she said quietly. No greeting. No judgment. Just acknowledgement. Everyone did. She stepped aside, letting him in. The bell chimed, softer now, in the evening quiet. Hannah looked up and smiled. "You came back." "I did." Kang-min felt his chest tighten at how easily she said it, like his presence was becoming expected rather than surprising. "I'm doing a puzzle," Hannah announced. "It's really hard. Wanna help?" Kang-min glanced at Halima. She gave him the smallest nod, permission, though still not absolution. He crossed to the table and lowered himself into the small chair across from his daughter. The puzzle was a landscape, mountains, a lake, too many pieces of blue sky that all looked identical. "This piece goes here," Hannah said confidently, jamming a piece into a spot where it clearly didn't fit. "I think it might go over there," Kang-min suggested gently. "Nope. Here." She pushed harder. He bit back a smile. Stubborn. Like him. Behind the counter, Halima was cleaning, wiping down surfaces, organizing supplies with methodical precision. Kang-min recognized the pattern. She always cleaned when she was thinking, processing. "Your company lost a lot of money," Hannah said, studying a puzzle piece. Kang-min blinked. "You know about that?" "I heard Mommy talking on the phone." Hannah tried another piece. "Still wrong." "She said you told the truth even though it was expensive." "That's accurate." "Was it scary?" "Yes." Hannah looked up at him with those serious eyes. "But you did it anyway?" "Yes." She nodded, apparently satisfied, and went back to the puzzle. "That's what brave means. Mommy taught me." Kang-min's throat went tight. They worked in silence for a while, Hannah deliberately putting pieces in wrong spots, Kang-min gently suggesting corrections, both of them pretending this was just about a puzzle. Eventually, Halima approached with 2 mugs of tea and a cup of warm milk for Hannah. She sat down, completing their small circle. "Hannah, sweetheart, finish your milk and then go wash up for bed," she said softly. "But the puzzle. We'll be here tomorrow." Hannah pouted but obeyed, draining her cup with exaggerated gulps before disappearing through the back curtain. The silence that followed was heavier. "This doesn't fix everything," Halima said finally, her hands wrapped around her mug. "I know. You told the truth. You exposed your father. You sacrificed your company." She looked at him directly. "Those are good things. Important things. But they don't erase 5 years. I'm not asking you to forget. I'm not finished." Her voice was gentle but firm. "You hurt me, Kang-min, deeply. You chose silence when I needed you to fight. You let your father's lies become truth without questioning them. And even now, even with everything you've done, I don't trust you." The words landed like stones, but they were honest. He could work with honest. "I don't expect you to," he said quietly. "Not yet. Maybe not ever. I don't love you anymore." Halima's eyes were dry but sad. "I don't know if I can love you again. That person I married, the man I thought I knew, I'm not sure he exists." "He doesn't," Kang-min admitted. "I'm trying to become someone better. Someone worthy of," he gestured helplessly at the bakery, at Hannah's abandoned puzzle, at the life they'd built without him. "This." Halima studied him for a long moment. "If you want to be in Hannah's life, truly be in it, it can't be when it's convenient. Not weekend visits when your schedule allows. Not gifts to make up for absence. You have to show up. Consistently. Even when it's boring or difficult or conflicts with whatever empire you're rebuilding. I will. You say that now. I'm selling the penthouse. The words came out before he'd fully processed them. I'm stepping back from day-to-day operations. The board voted to restructure, smaller, focused. I'll still be involved, but not. He paused. Not consumed. Halima's expression didn't soften, but something shifted in her eyes. Consideration, maybe. I'm not asking you to take me back, Kang-min continued. I'm not asking for forgiveness or reconciliation or any kind of future beyond what you're willing to give. I'm just asking for the chance to be her father. To show up. To be present. And if I say no? The question hung between them, terrifying in its simplicity. Then I'll respect that, Kang-min said, though the words cost him. But I'll still try to be in her life however you allow. Because she deserves a father who chooses her. Even if it's 5 years too late. Halima set down her mug. Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. You can pick her up from kindergarten, bring her here. Stay for dinner if you want. Weekend mornings, you can take her to the park. But you don't make promises you can't keep. You don't disappoint her. And the moment you prioritize something else, a meeting, a deal, an emergency that isn't actually an emergency, we're done. Understood? It was a test. Boundaries drawn in permanent ink. Understood. I mean it, Kang-min. She's already lost you once. I won't let her lose you again. You won't have to. The back curtain rustled. Hannah emerged in pajamas covered in cartoon dinosaurs, her hair damp from washing. She climbed into Halima's lap, settling in with the ease of ritual. Did you finish talking about grown-up stuff? She asked, yawning. We did, Halima said, stroking her daughter's hair. Hannah looked at Kang-min, her eyes already heavy with sleep. Are you staying? The question held more weight than she could possibly understand. Staying for dinner. Staying in her life. Staying even when it was hard. Kang-min met Halima's eyes over their daughter's head. She didn't smile, but she didn't look away. Yes, he said, his voice steady and sure. If you'll have me. Hannah's smile was sleepy but genuine. Okay. Good. She nestled deeper into Halima's arms, and Kang-min sat across from them, this family he'd lost and was trying desperately to earn back, and understood something fundamental. Forgiveness wasn't a moment. It was 1,000 small choices, made every day, to show up and try again. And he had a lot of days ahead of him. 6 months later. Kang-min sat cross-legged on the bakery floor after closing hours, helping Hannah build a tower out of wooden blocks. She was determined to make it taller than him, which meant the structure was becoming increasingly precarious. Higher, she commanded, handing him another block. It's going to fall. It won't if you're careful. She studied the tower with an engineer's focus. She had his eyes. His stubborn determination. Halima's grace under pressure. Kang-min placed the block with exaggerated caution. The tower swayed. Hannah held her breath. It held. See? She grinned triumphantly. I told you. You were right. As usual. She giggled, a sound that still caught him off guard with its pure, uncomplicated joy. 6 months ago, she'd been careful around him. Polite. Testing whether he'd stay or disappear like a dream you couldn't quite hold on to. Now she bossed him around with the casual authority of someone who knew he'd show up. Tuesday afternoons. Thursday evenings. Weekend mornings at the park. He'd missed exactly 0 scheduled visits. His company had stabilized, smaller, leaner, but profitable. The board had restructured. His father had resigned entirely, bitter but defeated. The Min-young family's lawsuit had been settled quietly. Kang-min's life looked nothing like it had a year ago. It looked better. Okay, one more block, Hannah declared. The tippy-top one. She handed him the final piece, bright red, smooth from years of small hands. Kang-min reached up carefully, tongue between his teeth in concentration, mimicking her earlier focus. The block settled on top. The tower stood, impossibly tall, impossibly balanced. Hannah clapped her hands. We did it. We did. Kang-min sat back, genuinely proud of a wooden block tower in a way he'd never been proud of quarterly earnings reports. Can we knock it down now? That's the best part. Before he could protest, Hannah swept her arm through the base. Blocks scattered across the floor in a cacophony of clattering wood. She dissolved into laughter, falling backward onto the floor in delight. Kang-min couldn't help it, he laughed too. From behind the counter, Halima looked up from the inventory sheet she'd been reviewing. Her expression was still guarded, still careful, but there was something softer there now. Not forgiveness, exactly. But possibility. She didn't love him. Not yet. Maybe not ever again. But she let him stay. And that was enough. All right, troublemaker, Halima said, setting down her pen. Time to clean up those blocks and get ready for bed. But mommy. No buts. You have kindergarten tomorrow. Hannah pouted but started gathering blocks, and Kang-min joined her, two sets of hands working together, building something small and simple and real. Later, after Hannah had been tucked into her small bedroom above the bakery, Kang-min and Halima stood in the quiet shop. The ovens were cool. The display cases empty. Outside, Seoul hummed with evening traffic. You're good with her, Halima said quietly. I'm trying. It shows. She folded her arms, not defensive, just present. She asked me yesterday if you were her father. Kang-min's breath caught. What did you say? I said yes. Halima met his eyes. And she said, good. I like him. The words hit harder than any board meeting verdict. I like her too, Kang-min managed, his voice rough. More than I knew was possible. This doesn't mean. I know. He held up a hand. I'm not asking for anything beyond what we have. I'm just grateful. For this. For her. For you letting me try. Halima studied him for a long moment. You're different. I hope so. The man I married would never sit on a floor playing blocks for 2 hours. That man was an idiot. A small smile tugged at her lips, the first real one he'd seen in 6 months. He had his moments. They stood in comfortable silence, and Kang-min thought about his father's penthouse. The awards on walls. The photographs with powerful men. The empire built on sacrifice and calculation and the belief that legacy meant towers of glass reaching toward an indifferent sky. His father had built something that would outlast him. But who would remember him? Who would laugh at his jokes, or draw him pictures, or hand him puzzle pieces with absolute trust that he'd know where they belonged? I should go, Kang-min said finally. Let you close up. Halima nodded. Thursday. Thursday, he confirmed. I'll pick her up from kindergarten. He moved toward the door, then paused. Halima? Yes. Thank you. For letting me stay. She didn't respond right away. When she did, her voice was soft. You earned it. Outside, Seoul stretched out before him, still brilliant, still beautiful, but no longer the measure of his worth. Kang-min's phone buzzed. A message from the board, quarterly results exceeded projections. Well done. He typed a quick acknowledgement, then pocketed the phone. Tomorrow, he'd deal with spreadsheets and strategy. Tonight, he'd remember the sound of his daughter's laughter when their block tower fell. He'd remember her small hand in his at the park last Sunday. He'd remember Halima's careful smile, not love, not yet, but the beginning of something that might grow into trust. His father had been wrong about everything that mattered. Legacy wasn't what you built in boardrooms or acquired through mergers. It wasn't quarterly earnings or market dominance or your name on a building that would outlive you by decades. Legacy was a 5-year-old girl handing you a puzzle piece and believing you'd know where it belonged. Legacy was showing up. Being present. Choosing the small, unglamorous, profound moments over the grand, hollow victories. Legacy was built in bakeries after closing hours, on floors covered in scattered blocks, in Tuesday afternoons and Thursday evenings and weekend mornings that would never make headlines but would be remembered forever by the people who mattered. Kang-min walked to his car, not the black sedan with security detail, but a simple sedan he drove himself. He thought about Hannah's drawing. 3 stick figures holding hands. And he understood, finally, what it meant to belong. The most important legacy isn't built in towers of glass. It's built in moments you choose not to walk away from.
If you enjoyed the story this far, don't let it end here. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss the next chapter and enjoy more story from us. And if this story gave you chills, drop a like and share it with someone who loves powerful romance with a dangerous edge. Your support keeps these stories coming,